Hi everyone, I'm Micah with ProWritingAid. It is great to see you all here today. Today's panel is going to be a wonderful discussion with three authors who have launched their romance writing careers through Wattpad. Just go ahead and jump into their introductions. Helena Harms has been writing since the age of 11, and since joining Wattpad in 2016, her stories have garnered over 5 million reads. Her debut novel, Never Kiss Your Roommate, was released by Wattpad Books in 2021. When she's not working on her story, Helena can be found curled up with a book, spending time with her friends, or crafting obscurely specific Spotify playlist. Helena is currently a university student residing in Germany. Our next panelist, Tamara Lush, is a Rita Award finalist, an Amtrak Writing Fellow, and a George C. Polk Award-winning journalist. She's a former journalist who writes contemporary romance set in tropical locations, and she also writes mysteries under the pen name Tara Lush. A fan of vintage pulp fiction book covers, Sinatra-era jazz, and 1980s fashion, she lives with her husband and 2 dogs on the Gulf Coast. Her novel Drive will be published by Wattpad Books in March 2022. And our third panelist, Misha Shohan, is best known for her Wattpad story, Glory of Midnight Sun, which generated over 500,000 reads and a large response to the community. Her inspiration for the story grew out of her fascination with the often misunderstood concept of loveless marriages and the realization that sometimes respect, trust, and understanding can be as, if not more important than the heart-stopping attraction so commonly depicted. When she's not writing, Ramisha is traveling her native country of Pakistan far and wide. She has a deep interest in other cultures and as a result is fluent in 3 different languages. Felena, Ramisha, Tamara, it is great to have you all here. I am going to go ahead and also introduce our moderator, Leah Rudlick, who is the content head at Wattpad. Guys, thank you all for being here. We are super excited to have you all. I think it's going to be a wonderful session. Panelists, if you all are ready, I will go ahead and pop off to learn with everyone else. Viewers, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box. I will be popping on 10 to 15 minutes towards the end of the session to go ahead and run that Q&A. All right, Leah, I guess I'll go ahead and hand it off to you.
Great, thank you so much. Hi everyone, so as Micah said, my name is Leah. I am the content lead at Wattpad, and basically what that means is I get to spend my time reading and learning about amazing stories by amazing writers like these 3 people here today. So thank you, Tamara, Ramisha, and Felena for joining us. So let's just kick it off with a seemingly simple question. Why romance? What drew you to this genre in general, and what drew you to start writing in this genre specifically? And Ramisha, why don't we start with you?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Ramisha Chauhan. I'm from Pakistan, and it's really nice to be here with all of you. The question, why romance? Romance is something which brings me personally very comfort. And all throughout my life, I've seen my parents, I've seen my family. They're like love and romance is so interconnected in our marriages, in our relationships, in our friendships, and everywhere. So, to get to write it, to prevent you, to get your own point of view across, it's a really good and very refreshing for me as a person to experience. Like romance for me is like comfort for me. But
yeah, that's great. Felena, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I've always found romance super comforting. Just something about the fact that you know that there will be a happy ending is just amazing. I write LGBTQ plus romance, so especially in that genre, I find it so uplifting and optimistic to read and also write happy endings for my characters to kind of also show other queer people that a happy ending is possible. So yeah, I really love how romance is this feel-good genre that also lets you explore some deeper themes.
That's great. Tamara.
I have loved romance since I was a teenager. I'm obviously a lot older than a lot of Wattpad readers and writers, so I came of age at a very different time, but I still read romance nonetheless, and I finally worked up my courage many, many years later to write. And my journey has been kind of twisty and turny and has not been filled with success all the time, but I found Wattpad, and I like to think of myself as writing stories that my 15-year-old, 16-year-old self would love. steamy stories, romantic stories. And also, I really do believe in the power of a happy ever after for readers, because we live in a society where things generally don't end happily, as we're finding out now. So I think that's really important to show that, and to show what good relationships between all people look like, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, I think we've, this year especially, and I know when the world is in turmoil, people often turn to romance. And I think we've definitely seen that, and the three of you really touched on that as well, for a variety of different reasons. Let's talk about posting on Wattpad specifically. And Tamara, you kind of alluded to this already, so let's start with you. But I know you went a bit of a different path, in that Wattpad isn't necessarily how you started writing or how you found your voice. So tell us a bit about your journey.
So I actually started writing romance in 2014. And I was a full-time reporter, and I wanted to write something that was happy. I covered a lot of crime and lots of terrible things. And so I actually got published with a traditional publisher, a small traditional publisher, for my first 2 books. And then I went indie. I did a lot of indie publishing. I published multiple books in indie on Amazon, both in Kindle Unlimited and elsewhere. And I liked the process, but I didn't love the process. I didn't love doing all the ads and the marketing. Did not speak to my skill set. I also had dabbled in serial fiction, and I had a foot in Wattpad, but then I jumped into Wattpad fully, and I actually took all of my books down from Amazon and put them all into Wattpad. I joined the Wattpad paid program. I was invited. And since then, I've just written more and more books on Wattpad. And actually 3 of my books, I've signed a contract to be published. As an aside, I also write traditionally published cozy mysteries, which are romance adjacent, but they don't have the sex and swearing and craziness of my romance. They're a little softer, and they're more for an older audience, people more my age or older. So I think that it's really worth saying that you may not find success right away. You may not find success consistently. I mean, I've been traditionally published, Wattpad published, small press published, and yet I just pitched a new cozy mystery series with my agent. I have a great agent, and it was rejected by everybody. Rejection happens in this profession, and it's up to you as the writer to find where your readers are and where you find success. And just because you find success in one place doesn't mean you will in another place. I happen to find it for my romance on Wattpad, which is why I'm sticking with it, because I love the readers and they love my work. That may not be true for everybody. So you may go through a twisty turning journey on your writing journey.
Yeah. I think I'm just going to deviate from the script a little bit here, because you're touching on something I want to dig into really quickly. Is what is your personal definition for success as a writer, and how did Wattpad enable this? You kind of touched on this in your answer, but I'd like to just dig into that a little bit.
I would say, for me, money is not the driving issue. So and some people, money is the driving issue. It is really nice to be compensated for your writing. What Wattpad gives me, aside from money, it also gives me recognition, and that is a personal motivator. It may not be a personal motivator for other people. Page reads and Kindle Unlimited may be your personal motivator. I think it's really worth looking at what motivates you and what makes you keep writing. And that will play into the feeling of success I think that one could have.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Rumisha, let's jump to you. Why did you start posting on Wattpad initially? And what was that experience like for you?
In a way, Wattpad, if I consider it, it's easy. Like if you're starting, if you're not a published writer yet, if you're not a very big name, if you're just writing, if you're trying to experiment with styles, if you're trying to find your own voice, Wattpad is the platform for you to do that. Because if you're not comfortable enough with your voice, because when I started writing Glory, it was the first novel. I didn't know my writing style. I didn't know anything concerned with what is about writing. So it was about, for me, finding my voice, what I did best, what I like, what is my cliche, what is my comfort zone, what is my niche. To find everything I have, you have to use Wattpad. So Wattpad in a start, because when I think, if I hadn't found Wattpad in that phase in 2016, if Wattpad wasn't for me, maybe I would never have written anything. Maybe I would have stopped writing altogether. Maybe I wouldn't have pursued this career. Maybe I wouldn't have written my second and third novel. So Wattpad was the thing which in my very initial days it supported me. So that's why I chose Wattpad, because
Yeah, that's great. I think we lost you a little bit on the tail end there with your audio, but love what you were saying about how it helped you kind of find your voice. Oh, you're back. Helena, what was the experience like for you in why and how you started posting on Wattpad?
Yeah, so my path to Wattpad was more straightforward than Tamara's. I just basically had a friend in 10th grade who was talking about the site where you could read and write online for free. And that just sounded amazing to me at that age. So then I got into the platform. I kind of lurked in the background as just a reader for a few months. And then I just started posting my chapters, not really expecting anything to come out of it. But then over time, this readership started to form. And yeah, since then, I haven't looked back. I've been really fortunate to have my book published through Wattpad. I don't think that at my age, I'm 20 years old, I wouldn't have dared to like really pitch my manuscripts anywhere else. So this was really, yeah, just a lot of luck, but also something that I don't think would have been possible through any other writing platform. So yeah, I love Wattpad, and I especially love that anyone can post on there. I mean, I write LGBTQ fiction, and in the traditional market, writers like me kind of tend to struggle. But on Wattpad, we have our own little corner where we really get to just write our little hearts out, which I think is amazing.
Let's talk a little bit about that just while we're on that topic, Helena. Did you have a moment when you started posting where you were like, oh, people are really reading my stuff and it's resonating with them? And what was that moment for you?
I still remember the first time I had over 100 notifications on Wattpad. That was like, I don't know, 3 months after I started posting, I think. And that just kind of blew me away, because 100 notifications back then seemed incredible to me, because I hadn't expected anyone to really read my stories. I was just like posting them for fun. And from that point on, that continued like support from a readership that just grew with every chapter I posted really like got me more into writing, because before then it had been very much a thing that I was just doing on the side. But after I noticed that people are really like engaging with the story and they have thoughts on it that they like comment, from that point on, I started taking it more seriously as well. So yeah, after the first 100 notification thing, and also after the first 1000 reads, that was when it kind of set in that people are interested in my writing and what I have to say.
That's great. And was Never Kiss Your Roommate the first story you published on Wattpad, or had you tried other titles before that one?
That was the second one. Before that, I posted a gay bad boy romance, which is very on brand for Wattpad. So yeah, that one was just a story that I wrote, no outline, nothing, no experience. But on the other hand, it was the most fun that I had writing up until that point. So yeah, I mean, we got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, and I think that's such a big thing, is so much about writing is having fun and using the space to really explore the stories that you do want to tell.
Exactly.
Ramisha, what about you? Did you have a moment where you were like, oh, people are reading my stories?
I would have to totally agree with the lead on this, because the first word is like, you like, what happened? This is what just happened. So the first time you open your phone and there's 100 notifications. The first time your book hit like a 1K, and the first time like I was contacted by Wattpad about this whole star thing. That was like I actually didn't consider that it would get to this point. So like that, the small milestones. Most of the time, it's not really about how like the extra and how big you've achieved. It's like the small moments, the small first comment, the comments. These are the things which for me are success, because when I started writing, as Feline said, I didn't basically said it, and as Tamara said it well, that I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the fun. I was just talking to a friend of mine just a few minutes ago, And I was explaining it to her that it's really not about the money for me. It's really not. It's about the fun for me, and about how wholesome writing makes me feel. So when I gathered that, when I got that from the people, when I got that from Wattpad, it was like that was what defined success for me personally.
Yeah, that's great. And Tamara, you touched on this a little bit, but did you have a moment where you realized you were really finding an audience on Wattpad?
I don't know if it was like a moment or it evolved over time. Really, the Wattpad community is really special, and the idea that you have, and some writers may not want this, but I personally love the interaction I have with readers. I love the conversation that I have with readers. I love the comments that readers leave. I think they're hilarious and fun and insightful, and I thrive on it. Now, I understand not everybody, I'm coming at this from a different place, but not everybody might like that, but I love it. And that's part of the reason why when I realized that people were commenting, probably with my story, Tell Me a Story, my serial romance, Tell Me a Story, I think that's when I really noticed that people were resonating, like my stories were resonating with people. And it just motivated me to go on. Like I've just started a new story on Wattpad 2 weeks ago, and it's a vampire romance. And I think it's worth saying that unlike with self-publishing or traditional publishing, Wattpad readers are forgiving of blended genres. With traditional publishing, I've tried to get published by Harlequin, and you really have to stay within with certain parameters. I mean, that's what they're famous for publishing, is stories with, especially their category romance, with certain parameters. And even on Kindle Unlimited, especially when you're a KU author, it's better to have a really strong genre. It's really much better to know going in what your story is. And that's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me, because my stories are kind of a mishmash of women's fiction, chick lit, erotic romance, suspense. That somehow doesn't work as well when you're indie published. It's better to know what you are if you're trying to market yourself. But on Wattpad, it's a lot easier to blend genres, and readers roll with that, and they love that. So I think when I realized that, that was the moment where I thought I really have some success here.
Let's talk a bit about the specific audiences that you each kind of found and fostered and created on Wattpad. So Ramisha, you said in your bio, and you've mentioned before, that the inspiration for Glory of the Midnight Sun grew from a fascination with the concept of loveless marriages. Why did this feel like an important story to tell?
When I started Wattpad, initially I was there for reading novels. And when I read novels, especially in the romance category, they were entirely based on the concept of love, and a kind of love which is so instantaneous, and there's just a spark and everything just falls into place. And it kind of didn't stick with me in a place, because when this kind of love that I see around my life in Pakistan, and kind of love I see generally in novels which I've read before, it was a slow, gradual process. So that got me thinking. The first step was the idea from instant love to a love which is slow. And the third point, which brought me to writing A Loveless Marriage, was the concept that what if there is not love? Like we are so focused on the marriages, and because the end point of a novel usually ends on a marriage. The epilogue usually has a marriage, and they live happily ever after. And I wanted, that got me to thinking, what if they do not have that? Why do the idea happily ever after always mean that the marriage is full of love and that? What about other things in life which are equally as important, like respect and trust and honesty and appreciation for their next person? So that got me a little bit, that idea. It wasn't like something which I always wanted to write. It was a slow, gradual process from reading Wattpad books, from reading other books. So it got me into thinking of the whole process of why, like, the other things which we should focus on if we want a more stable and healthy marriages and healthy relationships. And that's why I focus on that thing as well. Like love is the title of the Glory says, like love is ravishing, but is it everything? So I was focusing on that part.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Felina, I know you recently spoke in a Wattpad event around reshaping and reclaiming how LGBTQIAP+ communities are portrayed in literature. And I'd like to talk about that, or talk about your journey, I guess, in regards to this. So how has writing in this space impacted how you see yourself, and how has your audience reacted to storytelling in this space?
Yeah, so Wattpad and writing queer stories on Wattpad has definitely played a huge part in my kind of path to self-acceptance. Because when I first started writing queer romance, I hadn't even really come out to myself yet. And so I started posting this book, and all of a sudden there were other queer people who were sharing their experiences. And so we got into this really nice dialogue in the comments, and we all kind of bonded through the characters and through the story. And from that point on, I kind of got more comfortable with my sexuality. I started writing my second book, which is Never Kiss Your Roommate, where I started going even more in depth into what it's like coming out and all of that. And so I feel like through Wattpad and this very safe and very supportive space, I really learned a lot about myself, and hopefully kind of helped other people also along the way. I always like to say that writing queer stories on Wattpad feels a little bit like group therapy, because everyone's kind of talking about their experiences in the comments, and I've seen people kind of building group chats in the comments and, I don't know, cheering each other up. I've gotten messages from people telling me that my stories gave them the courage to come out to their parents or things like that, which that is probably my definition of success, that I managed to touch people in such a way just by kind of channeling all my own conflicts into something that I could share on Wattpad. So yeah, Wattpad has been incredibly important on my own kind of personal development journey. And I just really love how accepting the space is. There's this LGBT corner on Wattpad where we all kind of know each other, and a lot of readers just like circulate between us. And it's this really lovely and comforting space. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Wattpad, the way that it's just such a warm and supportive community.
That's wonderful. Such a powerful reading and writing can be such a powerful tool. So thank you for sharing that. Tamara, I know in some places you've classified your writing as sexy books for sharp women, and I'd love to know what your readers are getting out of your stories and what connections you've found you've been able to kind of foster with your audiences.
I think that the readers for my stories, and honestly, I think there's a real perception that Wattpad is for teenagers, it's for teenage writers, it's for teenage characters. And to some extent, that may be true. But I will tell you that my most popular book on Wattpad is about a newspaper publisher who is 33 years old. And probably half of the readers maybe haven't even ever picked up an actual newspaper in their life, because who reads newspapers now, really? That's sort of an inside joke. I'm a former journalist. But so what I'm trying to say is that Wattpad has a really varied audience. And I think that what my audience, my readership has in common is that they want to read stories about real women in their 20s and 30s, and in one case in their 40s. That book has a lot of reads too. But the thread is that all of my heroines are difficult. They're difficult women who make sometimes really poor choices in love, poor choices in life, and yet their love interest loves them. And I think that the message that my readers get is that no matter how difficult or flawed you are as a person, you will find love, and you are worthy of love. And isn't that true for all of us? I think that that is sort of the overarching message for romance, but for my characters as well. That you can be a flawed and difficult and maybe even an unlikable woman at times, and you are worthy of love, because society tells us that if you are not perfect and thin and a certain way, and if you are difficult or nasty or resistant, then you are not worthy. And I want to reject that narrative, and so I do in my romance.
I love that. That's very powerful. I had put this question kind of at the end, but I kind of want to go to it now because I think we're speaking in a really interesting space right now. But just as writers who've spent a lot of time in this space, what do you think the role of romance plays in society now? And Wattpad aside, just the genre of romance and the variety of different stories that kind of exist in this space. Tamara, we'll just kind of go back down the line. You already spoke to this a little bit just in your answer, but why do you think romance is so powerful in society?
Partly of what I just said, that people can see that others go through troubles and that maybe don't make them the best decisions, and they can still find love, because love is it's one of our basic needs, right? And if we think that we're not lovable or that we're not worthy, that's the sort of the worst message that you can get across. So as a writer, I want to promote, I may not write LGBTQ, or I may not write Muslim romance. I write obviously from my point of view and my work and my life experience, but a place like Wattpad can foster diversity to show that everybody can deserve love. And I think that that's the most important thing about Wattpad and romance, is that it's so international, and it opens up your horizons just by being around so many people. And I think that's just the coolest thing. I like, one time I had someone from, I think it was Nigeria, message me, and she said, "I love your heroines because they have a dream." And I was like, oh God, I just wanted to cry. Like, the fact that I could touch somebody and that somebody got that from my book, somebody who was clearly, 30 years younger than me or whatever, and, from a totally different place, that is amazing and powerful. And that's what Wattpad gives me.
That is amazing. Helena, do you have anything to add on this topic?
I definitely agree with everything that Tamara said. I think that romance is often kind of underestimated, and like, people think that just because it's mainly written by women, or because it's like fluffy or something, that it isn't as, I don't know, valid of an art form, I suppose. But I mean, just like Tamara said, romance is so powerful because it really shows that everyone deserves a happy ending, no matter who you are or what you've done or whatever. So I think that, yeah, and I also love the way that romance is growing more and more diverse and inclusive, because, yeah, it's just incredibly powerful seeing people being loved for who they are, being validated in healthy relationships, all these things. So yeah, I wish that people would stop kind of making fun of romance or not taking it seriously, because it has so much to offer. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Ramisha, anything to add?
I think I'd agree with what Tamara and Dean said. Mostly, I mentioned in the start that romance is like this comfort blanket, which you like to snuggle yourself in. So, like, even in a normal day life, in everyday life, when you have something where everything is being bad in your life, you can rely on a book which gives you comfort. And at the same time, you can learn a lot from that book as well, because as Tamara said, as Dean said, their books are not limited only to the romance part. We have some lessons for there, like you said, Tamara said that her reader message, that she liked about the dream part. So, like, there's also some lessons in there. There's not just the romance, the lessons, the ideas that you have to life with. Because I remember once, I wrote Glory when I was almost 17, 18, and Alvida, who was almost 30, like, she was but older than me. She messaged me and she said that, like, you saved my marriage. And I was like, it was something which was something for me as an, like, 17, 18, 19-year-old person, was something which I didn't expect. But it's like a lesson for other people. So, like, when we read romance, it's like a lesson for us. There has to be a lesson for us in some way.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk a bit about promoting yourself as a writer, and how you've all navigated that. And Felina, let's start with you. How do you navigate promoting yourself as a writer, promoting your stories, and simply being a person, and writing the stories that you want to write? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so I've been very lucky that I came to Wattpad and readers kind of instantaneously came to me. So I didn't have to do too much advertising in the beginning. But now that I've, like, obviously gotten a book published and stuff, I've tried to do a little bit more on the self-advertising front. I still think that the most important thing is to put most of your work and most of your focus into the writing itself, because I still think that if your writing is solid, word of mouth, especially on Wattpad, is going to do the most work for you. But other than that, I just try to advertise myself in a way that I am comfortable with. So For example, I love Instagram Reels as a way to kind of attract readers. And I love just kind of sprinkling like advertising in between my more personal posts on Instagram. In general, I really recommend Instagram for connecting more with your readers on Wattpad, because through Instagram, I have gotten so much more closer with a lot of my Wattpad readers that I now consider them friends. And I think once you've gotten to that point, those readers will really follow you over into different genres. They will read whatever book you will put out. And that is like such a valuable thing, just having this core readership that you can rely on, that will be there, whatever your next project will be. So yeah, I think just advertise in a way that still feels like you and still feels authentic, and focus most of your attention on the writing itself. And yeah, just have fun with it, I think.
Do you have an author brand, or did you spend time thinking about that, or is it something that kind of carved itself out naturally for you?
I think because so much of my identity is already kind of woven into my stories, my author brand is kind of who I am as a person. So there's not really that much of a distinction between human Feline and author Feline. So I try to be just myself on social media and just be as authentic as possible, because I think that that attracts more people than trying to put on the super professional facade.
Yeah, that's great. Ramisha, what about you? How have you navigated building up your author brand, or similar to Felina, was it something that kind of naturally carved itself in there?
Yeah, when I started it, I didn't have any Instagram or Twitter accounts. But when I started writing mystery novels, I was made to realize that how important all of these things are, because writing, as Feline said, 100% agree with that the writing sells itself. But there has to be a way in which you can promote it. It has to be the platforms in which you can promote it. So I first shifted to Instagram. I made like my contrary to what Feline said, my writer side and my the personal side are very different. I have a whole another account for my writings and for promoting Wattpad content. So I like promote edits and do edits, and then last year almost I shifted to Twitter as well, because Twitter is one place where you can actually connect a lot with a lot of readers at the same time. You can do threads, you can do a lot of things. Twitter has helped me a lot. Instagram has helped me a lot. And as a writer brand, it's like it's something you sell for yourself in a way that when I made my Instagram account or my Twitter account, they were mostly Twitter is a little bit personal for me. Instagram is not. So I mostly share most of my stuff and most of my edits and stuff on Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is for something which I juggle between my personal life and the work life. But that's how I created my brand. I didn't incorporate too much of myself into it, because I wanted to keep keep a line between both of these sides of me. But that's how I get to it.
Great. And Tamara, I know you've had maybe a bit of a different experience in this place, or in this space, I should say, because you are a journalist and you write romance and you write mystery. So how have you kind of navigated carving out those different spaces and promoting yourself in different ways?
Well, when I was self-publishing, I came up with the tagline, sexy books for sharp women. And, most of my books are set in Florida, my romance books. So I tried to go around, branding with palm trees and very Florida, very tropical colors. And most of my books in that space, kind of fall into that space. So I focus most of my branding on that. And I live in Florida, so it's easy to do. The same with my mysteries, although my mysteries are written under a different name. It's still aligned. And I find that my romance readers will read my mysteries, but the mystery people don't necessarily read the romance. I find it easier to brand in terms of having the same fonts and the same colors for everything. So everything online looks fairly similar and cohesive. Most of my covers on Wattpad, my book covers have the same fonts. They all look very similar. And Wattpad has worked with me for some of my covers too. So generally, I just try to make everything cohesive. I probably don't share as much as maybe some people do on Wattpad online, because honestly, I'm 50 years old and my readers are not mostly 50 years old. So the things that interest me probably aren't going to interest my readers. Like me loving Frank Sinatra, like, I don't know, Felina, do you love Frank Sinatra? I don't like, I'm not interested in showing parts of my world really to anybody, because that's not what I'm interested in. I'm a private person. That said, I'm on social media a lot. I love to self-promote. I love to self-promote my work and promote the work of others too. So, and being a journalist, I'm on Twitter, and I'm no longer a journalist right now. I'm a full-time fiction writer, but my Twitter is probably the place where the real me comes out, for better or for worse.
I know we only have about 5 minutes left, and then we can turn it over to questions. So just really quickly, is there, 1 to 3 things that you think writers might overlook, that you've seen a lot of success with? You kind of touched on this, Tamara, just now with like cohesiveness of fonts and that sort of thing, but is it cover art? Is it profile aesthetic? What is something that you realized really worked for you and you really committed to kind of going all in on? Let's start with you, Tamara.
A cover aesthetic. For me and my romance, I wanted it to be super sexy, but not like, I do have a couple of ab covers. I would say that I wanted my covers to look sensual and to just have a consistent brand. So if you look on Wattpad and you look at the covers that are there, you can see that everything has the same font, and you can see that my darker romance looks darker, and then like my Paradise Beach series looks like a fun beachy rom-com. You can see how it's really important to have a cover that, especially on Wattpad, because people are scrolling through hundreds of covers at one time to look for a book. So it's really important to have a cover that reflects the tone of your book. And then beyond that, if you can kind of tie them in together with fonts, that I find that really helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Felina, what about you?
I would definitely agree with the importance of covers. I mean, on Wattpad, there are many opportunities. For example, there are books that are called cover shops, where you can request a cover from an artist in exchange for just crediting them or something like that. So yeah, a good cover is definitely important. I also think that the importance of having a solid description of your book is sometimes overlooked. A lot of books on Wattpad don't really have a description, just like an out of context quote or something that says, "I'm not good at descriptions, please read my book, it's good, I promise." And I think that, I mean, if you're grocery shopping, for example, you wouldn't necessarily buy a tin without anything on the label. So I think giving a hint of what's inside is definitely good. Just, a succinct description. This is my protagonist. This is their goal. These are the obstacles. Just a little bit to go off on. And then also interacting with readers can definitely help. Wattpad gives you the amazing opportunity that you have this direct line between reader and author. So really responding to comments, thanking readers for taking the time out of their day to check out your work is something that I found really helpful in establishing a sense of community and having readers maybe return to your other projects as well.
That's such a good call about description. Often can be overlooked, and it is such a huge factor in people discovering a story and choosing to go deeper with it. So great call. Ramisha, anything that you would say tends to be overlooked that you've seen a lot of success with or you really commit to doing?
I think promoting your book well enough on the different platforms as well as on Wattpad, the cover that you mentioned, the taglines, like they're very important and they're often overlooked, and people just add like 2 or 3 taglines and they're very basic ones. It's like use the taglines very wisely to your benefit. And as Feline said about establishing a connection with your readers, because it's really important. If you like personally go back and thank them, if you reply to them on the direct messages, it's kind of built a very stable and strong relationship between you and the reader that kind of makes them from a person who's just randomly reading a book into a person who appreciates the writer and who is like like if a next book comes in, I'll probably come back and read it. So like to build that kind of connection with the readers.
Yeah, the reader-writer connection is a pretty special thing that can make a lot of difference. So that's great. Thank you all. Micah, I'm happy to turn it over to questions if you want to take it over.
Okay, awesome, awesome. That was a great panel, guys. Thank you all so much. We have plenty of questions here. I think I'm going to start with some of the ones that our panelists can answer, and then Leah, I'm going to kick it over to you for a few that are specifically on a little bit about Wattpad. Alrighty, so guys, I guess panelists, just a lot of our readers are wanting to know that how do you guys deal with negative comments on your work? Because I know like getting a negative review on Goodreads or something like that, that's gotta hurt. So how do you guys all deal with it? Tamara, if you'd like to kick us off.
Yeah, I may not be the best person to answer this. I'll be honest. I was a journalist for 30 years, and the things I had people say to me to my face in email, on Twitter, in phone calls, really were so awful that pretty much anything anybody can say to me for my fiction is like it doesn't affect me. Like you can give me a 1-star, it doesn't matter. So unless somebody is being super abusive in the comments, I tend to leave most comments up because I think that Wattpad is a great place for dialogue. And if someone wants to criticize my work, then maybe I'll learn something or maybe not. I'm open. I read my reviews. I'm an unusual author probably in that I read my reviews and I don't really take them that personally. I feel like probably because I was a journalist for so long, once my work is out there, it's kind of no longer my own, and it belongs to the readers. And if they want to comment, then that's okay with me. So I will only delete comments if they are, abusive to somebody else, threatening, racist, homophobic, or if they show people or try to tell people where to find free copies, because a lot of my books are in the Wattpad paid program. So if they tell people, go to this pirating site to find free books, I'll delete those. Mostly though, I don't delete comments. I just let people talk and read it, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Ramisha, what about you? How do you kind of deal with it?
It's a simple way. I just go back and read the good comments. It's there because I don't have a very fast stick, and I just the comments which have already been introduced, which people have commented, the good comments, because they're always good comments. So, I try to focus on the good part of the thing. I try to focus more on the positive messages that people have sent, how I can influence them. That kind of mentality is what I've achieved, try to adopt in so 3 years, 4, 5, 6 years I've been on.
And Helena, what about you?
I've been really fortunate so far not to have too many negative comments. I feel like I exist in this very cozy, comfortable space on Wattpad. But I think it's important to just learn what advice to take and what just to leave, because you won't please everyone with your writing. It's simply not possible. It's good to read constructive criticism, but at some point it's not constructive anymore. It's just destructive. And at that point, I think it's important to make that distinction between this is something that I can learn from, and this is something that will help me grow as a writer. And this is something that is simply another person's issue and that I don't really have to cater to if I don't want to.
Right, right. Well, that's great advice on how to basically handle all of that. Our next kind of set of questions is going to kind of regard community. And Felina, I know that you had mentioned that you had kind of developed a community just around your work and everything else with a lot of other folks in the LGBTQIA community kind of rallying towards your stories. Yeah, was that something that you just continued to kind of build organically? And maybe we can get some opinions from Ramisha and Tamara on building a community, kind of maybe with other authors, things like that, if it doesn't necessarily happen organically.
Yeah, so I was really lucky that it started out very organically, and I think it's very important to kind of put in the work to foster that readership once it's there, and to like regularly respond to comments, like I said earlier. offering them the opportunity to reach out to you on Instagram or something like that and kind of get to know you a little bit more can be super helpful as well. And other than that, just connecting with other Wattpad writers as well can also be super valuable. Discord channels are amazing for anything like that, but also just sliding into someone's Wattpad DMs and going like, hey, I love your work. Something like that can also just be the first step to kind of forming a little supportive circle that you can bounce ideas off and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my advice.
And you mentioned Discord. We have some folks that are actually looking for Wattpad writers communities. All three of you can chime in here. Are you finding your best luck is going to be with Discord? Is it going to be just connecting through the Wattpad platform? Are there other Facebook groups, things like that, that people need to keep an eye out for?
I think Discord is really popular with a lot of Wattpad authors. I'm in a couple of Discords with them. I think it's also worth mentioning that you can find really wonderful communities in what's called book clubs on Wattpad. Like I'm in one called Pretty and Punk Book Club, and we all every couple of weeks we read a chapter of each other's book and make comments. And it's turned out to be really like it's very thoughtful. Constructive criticism, and it allows you to get to know other people, and you can usually find one in your particular subgenre. This one is for a little bit more like darker romance, more like paranormal romance. I actually just put in my new vampire book, and I'm excited to see what the readers there think. So you may find, if you ask around or if you do some searching, you can find some book clubs that usually you can find community there on Wattpad, and those have been super fun.
Ramisha, anything to add?
Yes, I think as well as making personal relationships with different friends and different authors, because I have a lot of author friends as well. I have a lot of reader friends as well, and we read each other's books and we communicate. And like my best friend right now was my reader once. So like forming that community, forming that leadership, and forming that connection with all important. Their book club, their Discord, there's a whole lot of this.
Awesome. Alrighty, so I think, let's see, just a couple of questions on kind of your posting cadence. I think we have a lot of Wattpad hopeful authors here. What kind of schedule do you guys usually post on? What worked out for you guys? What's your best advice there?
I'm just gonna start. I find it really helpful to stick to a certain schedule. I know some people like just giving sporadic or spontaneous updates, and it totally depends on how much time you as an author have to write. But I really like one update a week. I update every Friday. I found that that's just a nice way to end the week. And entering the weekend, a lot of people really look forward to having a little bit like something to read. And before that, I also tried out a 2-chapter a week schedule, which was Wednesdays and Saturdays. But a lot of readers, I think, get a little bit overwhelmed when they see so many notifications for updates coming in. So yeah, it really depends on personal taste. I like once a week so that no one gets overwhelmed, and I have time to write a lot and don't get stressed out by having to post several times a week.
And Helena, just so our viewers also have an idea, generally